Welcome to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, the show where we talk about finding strength when life falls apart. I'm your host, Melie, and around here, resilience isn't perfection. It's falling flat, getting back up, and maybe laughing about it later. From breakups to breakthroughs, we mix faith, neuroscience, and a little sass to help you rebuild a life that actually feels like yours. Are you ready? Let's go. Today's guest brings a powerful but very grounded perspective on resilience. Eric Davis is a combat-decorated U.S. Navy SEAL and the best-selling author of Raising Men. He served as an instructor in naval special warfare and was later selected for specialized intelligence operations in some of the world's most demanding environments. Today, he draws on those experiences to teach practical lessons on purpose, discipline, and resilience. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into all of this today with resilience and habits. And I wanted to kick us off with a question about the habits that you personally return to stay grounded. So when life gets stressful or unpredictable, what are those habits that you return to in your own life?
I'd have to say unpredictable or things starting to move around doesn't mess with me too much, but that is something that could potentially make somebody stressed. Now, stress is something that will come in, obviously, being an entrepreneur, trying to make payroll, different things like that. And the other thing I'd say, just on that note, I typically can get overwhelmed by having so many things I want to do at the same time. So those are the times when I'd start to stress. And I'd say the thing that I do during those times, it hasn't been something I've always done, but it's something I just learned called benevolent detachment. And basically, it's just a move in the morning and the evening where you just pray to God and tell Jesus that I give everyone and everything to you. And I kind of will say that a couple times and visually put them in my hands. And then I push it up to the sky. And it sounds weird, but it's extremely effective. And I'm prone to kind of chopping stuff like that off so I can get after what it is I needed to get after. That's probably my best move, though, benevolent detachment.
That's really interesting. I hadn't heard of that term before. So you said you do it twice, so in the morning and then at night, or can somebody do this whenever these kind of stressful thoughts come up?
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. But if I'm like in a time or a moment in time where there's extraordinary amount of pressure or stress, that's when I make sure I do it at least twice a day. But I think even earlier today, I threw something up there just because it wouldn't get out of my mind. So I just give it to God. And then I do try to acknowledge and be like, all right, God, I know you have this, but let me know what it is I'm supposed to do with this next. And then I just go on about my business. And that works incredibly well. I can fool myself really well with narrative.
I'm definitely going to give that a try. Now, when you think about resilience, the word resilience, how would you define it, not as a theory, but as a practice?
Yeah, so when I think about resilience, I also think about perseverance at the same time. And here's what I mean by that. So perseverance is basically a sustained effort despite the difficulty or the failure. Perseverance to me has it has the vibe of pushing myself too far, or maybe a better example would be like working out. I'm going to persevere through the difficulty of pushing the weights up, and those weights going up is going to start tearing down muscle and breaking me down. So the reason I bring that up with resilience is now the ability to maintain and or restore your capacity. So I always put those two things together because if I'm going to be resilient, I need something to have happened to recover from. So my definition of resilience would be the ability to maintain and restore your capacity to take action.
So restoring capacity, can you elaborate a little bit more on what that means?
Sure. So when I'm talking about restoring capacity, well, first, let me put these two together if I can: maintain and or restore. So here would be an example. So like in SEAL training, if I'm thinking to maintain my capacity to act, right, then I'm doing things like, one of the things they have us do is we run on the beach and soft sand a whole bunch. And I remember my whole strategy of soft sand would be to try to plant my feet in the very divot that the guy in front of me left when his foot struck. So that way I don't have to deal with all the energy that gets dissipated into the sand. That's an example of okay, I'm working to maintain my capacity to act. So I'm trying to reduce the amount of tear down, surf passage, right? You've got guys paddling with wooden paddles who aren't necessarily familiar with the ocean, right? And if you're a surfer, you know when a wave comes, things are going to get crazy. So I would maintain my ability to act by diving out of the boat before guys start flailing. And it sounds kind of crazy, and you wouldn't think about that in SEAL training, but there's all kinds of things that we do to make sure we reduce the amount of destruction to our bodies and our minds. So that's what I mean by maintain. Another way I maintain is what's called anticipatory avoidance. So if I use the SEAL example again, we would be standing really early in the morning. We're supposed to go in for a long, cold swim in the Pacific Ocean. I would be the one sitting there like, we're probably not even going to go in the water. Now, the reason I bring that up is the whole idea, right? There's that quote, we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. I think that's like Seneca. So being resilient, a whole lot of it is reducing the amount of destruction we do to ourselves. And I bring that up too, because I think a lot of times when we're talking about resilience, people are thinking about trauma, destruction, something unexpected happened. You know what I'm talking about? Like all of these things. And I don't think there's a lot of conversation about mitigating most of that. And there's just a lot of ways to do that. So that's the maintain part, maintaining my ability. Now, let me just go, just while I'm on the maintain thing, if I can. Important pieces of the maintaining your ability to act. And when I say maintain, mostly what I mean is just reduce the destruction of the moment. But I think there's other things like being in a state of joy. Like people are always walking around. I'm sure you know this. People are always walking around being focused on being happy, which is different than being in a state of joy. So joy, operating in our God-given purpose, operating hand in hand with God, that's part of, I just mentioned that benevolent detachment. So there's a way I can become more resilient by not letting all of the stuff fall onto me. I'm clear that I have a purpose on this planet. I was created for something. I've identified all the parts of my purpose, all 50 plus parts of it. And I've prayed and I've talked to God about it. So I operate in a state where I believe I'm fulfilling the mission that He has for me to fulfill on this earth. So you want to talk about resilience. So not only am I mitigating a lot of the pain and stress of the moment because I believe I'm purpose driven, and I do believe that that's what God wants me to be doing at the moment, right? I ask Him to bless it or break it kind of thing. So that mitigates a whole bunch. But then think about that. Now think about if I got it right, which I believe that I do because I believe I have a relationship with God and we have conversations and I know His voice to the extent that I do. But think about that. Wouldn't it make sense if you're operating within a very well-defined purpose? Like there's a little bit work to define your purpose, but it's not super hard. But if you're operating inside of that purpose, and now we're talking about the replacement or the repair of whatever we've been through, like that's the ultimate source of renewal. So that's how I think about dealing with resilience. So we're going to avoid, right? Or like mitigate the amount of damage we do to ourselves. And then we're going to repair whatever has happened to us. So I think about that fundamentally, operating with purpose. Oh, another thing is I'm always making sure I'm operating in my passion. So purpose is what we're supposed to do. Passion is how we do it. So not only did that mitigate, right? It manages the amount of resilience I'm going to need, but I get to wake up the next morning getting to do what I was built to do. So that floods me with more energy and that gets me going again. And then, of course, there's the other things that a lot of people don't think about: sleep, nutrition, exercise, meditation, walks, like all of these things. Those are very tactical or strategic. So I hit a bunch of stuff right there. Let me pause to let you come back with any questions, or can I cover that question?
Yeah, no, that you covered it really well. And I love a lot of what you said there. One thing I just want to say too is how much it does really matter. All those things that we don't think about, like you were saying, nutrition, sleep. I cannot nearly be as resilient if I am sleep deprived. Like that just doesn't work as well. So that's interesting. But I know that for you specifically in SEAL training, there are days where you are really sleep deprived. So how do you handle resilience in those circumstances for listeners? It's not going to be that they're going through SEAL training, but maybe they're in the midst of a divorce and everything's hitting at once, all the paperwork and the lawyers and all this stuff. So they are kind of drowning in it. They are probably not getting that great nutrition. They are probably not really sleeping well because their mind's keeping them up. Like, what can they do in those moments to start building resilience into their lives?
So I'll come back. Let me answer that with this. I mentioned purpose and passion. Let me put it in that context right there. So, first thing is to knock the rearview mirror off the situation. Like, no more looking behind us. That's the term. We're going to fall into that world of positive psychology, looking forward. So when you're really going through it, I can remember when I first became an entrepreneur, I left the Navy. I didn't have a job. I was 16 years, about 3 years away from retirement. And this was 2008. And if anyone was around then, it was not the best economy. But I had a clear purpose. And I can remember being on my office floor, like deep breathing, heart rate going. I was out. I was like, just like, oh my gosh, we're about to, I had a house, 4-bedroom house in South Orange County. Like it was a burn rate going on, but it was my purpose that pulled me through. So I'm always in a state of, oh, I'm to produce this outcome. I wake up to produce outcomes that are out in the future. And that helps you. It doesn't just help you, it is the mechanism to get through just about anything. And I'm going to come back to passion too, because they go so hand in hand. So if things get really down, or get really hard, or things are going wrong, then I really lock onto my purpose. Does that make sense? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's the iron rod. So when things are getting stormy, I have my students, because I run online groups, right? I have classes and I have my students, and they'll tell me, like, oh my gosh, this divorce happened, that happened. And I'm like, okay, let's come back to the basics. Where are you at on your purpose? And they're like, oh, I haven't really paid attention to it because I had all this stuff going on. I was like, good Lord. Okay, so think about that. So if you're on a ship or a boat, say you're in a small boat out in the ocean, and the storms start coming in, that is not the time to get rid of your radar and your compass and your map. That is the time to get a hold of those things and lock on to your port, wherever you're trying to get to, your safety. And that's always has to do with your purpose.
Okay, very interesting. And what would you say to the person who's like, love that, but I don't know what my purpose is?
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody about this recently, and every time when I'm talking to people, I'm always curious, like, why don't they ask me? Because if somebody asks me what I do, that's basically what I do. I teach people to use their passions to fulfill their purposes, right? Because there's a whole reason for that. But here's how you would do it. Let me think about this in the context of what I could just speak. So, purpose is to know the 50 plus parts of your personal, financial, and professional life. So, we have a purpose, and it was given to us. And there's about 20 or so professional, there's about 6 financial, but there's about a dozen personal purposes that we all share. There's nothing unique about them. I'm talking spirituality, friends, brother or sisterhood, fun, adventure, finances, your career, community, helping others. These are all what's called permanent domains of human concern. This is where I got it from, Dr. Fernando Flores. Now, to get your purpose, another way I can say that to shortcut that list, purpose to identify all of the things that either produce your good life or destroy your good life. That's another way to do it without that list. Although I think using that list, because a real smart scientist came up with it, is a better start. So that's it. Now we get that list and then we identify the positive impacts of caring for it. So you can take anything like spirituality. You could do this right now. Like, all right, well, what are the positive impacts of caring for your spirituality? There's answers for that all over the place. You write those down. What are the negative impacts of not caring for your spirituality? One of them is you wouldn't be very resilient, right? Like Jesus tells us, like the doves out there, the birds, whatever, like none of them are worried about what they're going to eat tonight, right? The clothes, I'm not quoting scripture correctly because I don't remember quotes, but you know what I'm saying. So positive and negative impacts. And then you design a strategy to produce the positive and remove the negative. That is really all there is to it. And I mean, no, that's not all there is to it, but fundamentally, that's what purpose is. And what it does is it aligns all of your thought and action, and I call it like a strategic filter. So if you were out in the woods with a photographer, like say you're out in the woods with me, I'd be identifying threats, potential attack spots. Like, if I see movement or I see anything off color, I was a sniper instructor for 5 years. I'm going to see all of the stuff because it was programmed into me through language and repetition. A photographer would see light and shadow and contrast and all of these things. Same idea with purpose. You get a hold of those dozen or so things, identify the good and bad impacts, and then identify the strategies or AKA practices to be and to care for them. You're now operating with purpose. You are now walking around, and guess what? Everything you see and hear is going to get filtered through that purpose. And when times are tough, you have that to lock onto. Like, oh, I just got to hold my purpose because there's something I'm going to learn here. I'm going to develop capacity. right? I'm going to develop a new character. I'm going to learn something from this event. And the only reason that would be the case is because it's going to help me fulfill my purpose.
When somebody does identify that purpose, what would you say to the person who, a lot of times our identities of how we feel about ourselves shapes our purpose, but when somebody goes through something like a divorce, their identity kind of rocks a bit. So how does their purpose become more of an anchor in that situation rather than completely shift around?
Yeah. So if we think about, so when you're thinking about purpose, it initially shows up as selfish, right? Because I just described family, friends, fitness, and then the impacts on my life and all that, right? It initially feels selfish, but then you start to understand, like, well, wait, the reason why I'm mastering my purpose and identifying it, because if I'm going to help any other human being, fundamentally speaking, it has to be with one of those 12 things. You see where I'm going?
Mhm.
So if I'm operating from a state of like, well, purpose is what I was created for, then when I'm thinking about my identity will become tied to my purpose. So I was created. So how I would say is I was created to fulfill my specific professional, financial, and professional purposes. And then my identity would say, I fulfill my professional, financial, and personal purposes. Now, that sounds overly simplified, but that's technically a very small affirmation statement. So, to keep our identity aligned with our purpose is to keep our identity aligned with the person we were created to be. And then now we got some superpower coming in, right? So, everything we're talking, a lot of the way we're talking about, like, okay, these are tips and techniques and psychology. But when we connect them that way, like, okay, now we're getting a download from something above us. Identity, it's going to be really hard to hold on to your identity if you don't have those purposes internalized, because how could you be the person that fulfills those and helps others do the same if you don't remember what those are?
Okay. Then you also talked about passion. So, can you dive a little bit more into the difference? Because I think some people use those terms interchangeably, purpose and passion.
Okay, so I'm going to give you what when I do talks, I've had people say I've weaponized the word. So I'm going to give you my weaponized version of passion.
Okay.
So passions are flow state producing strategic operating practices. That's the things we're doing every day with intention that produce the tangible products and or services that help other human beings care for what impacts their ability to live a good life, aka their purposes. And there's one more piece to it. At a level that is equal to or greater than the amount of value to others that your financial purpose dictates. Now, that one requires a little bit of a classroom time, but what I would have people take away from that is passions are how you do things. So if purpose is what you're to do, a passion would be how you do it. And let me take that just a little deeper so people can move with this right now. A lot of times when we're talking about passion, I'm a writer. I'm a published author. I write for a living. 95% of my time is me creating and writing. So a lot of people would say that they're passionate about becoming a writer. Is that fair? Like you've heard
Yep.
something like that?
Yep.
What happens is with passions, we confuse the noun, right, with the verbs. So here's what I mean by that. So, what is a writer? Yes, there's a little bit of prestige. You get to be on an awesome podcast like this one, and I mean, there's some cool. I mean, I can work a couple hours a day with just my laptop, and I could be all traveling all around the world. They're always thinking about that, and that's how they think of passion, but it's not. That's the noun. It's the little tiny verbs. Here's what I mean. So, what is a writer? What would be the little verbs? Well, you study every day, you highlight, you take meticulous notes, you obsess over your notes being organized, then you write once, you write twice, you write three times. Being a writer is kind of like pounding a nail into a wall with your bare brain. So, passions are how you do something. They are the little verbs. So let's bring that back to resilience. I mentioned it when I was talking about being resilient, but a lot of people are getting things done that are outside of their gifts. So, passions in our Christian world are referred to as gifts or talents. So passions are how we do something, the little verbs. So if someone says, I want to be a baker, I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, I get to create these beautiful muffins and everything like that. Like, well, no, that's the outcome. Like, what are the verbs? You wake up early. I don't know how a baker does it. Roll the dough, and cook. Whatever those things are. And but that's a big deal. Do you get what I'm saying? So I wake up jumping out of bed no matter what happened the next day because I get to go do what my body and soul just are driving me to do already. Huge for being resilient. And that's just a lot of times I'll talk about this with SEALs too, just while I'm going. Is people look at like Navy SEAL training or ultra marathons or adventure, you know what I mean? And these big things like, wow, the amount of discipline and grit and perseverance and resilience and everything like that. I'm like, I don't think so. What you're observing is somebody who is inherently prone to falling into a state of flow during those activities. Flow, being in the zone, right? Like when kids play video games, they forget to eat, they forget to sleep. So that's an example of, I think a lot of people don't make it through SEAL training because they were after the noun and they weren't really down with the verbs, being in cold water, repeating something, you know what I mean, over and over again. So for me, if you watched me in SEAL training, you were not watching a major act of resilience and perseverance. Not that it didn't happen, but you're watching me operate in my natural state of flow, aka my passion.
Interesting. I've never heard it put like that before, but that makes so much sense. So it's more of like we each have these natural sort of passions that we are going to be that work for us. Each person's different, and so we just have to find where we fit and what is going to fuel those passions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but I would back it out even a little bit more. I'll give you a good resource, a book, if you remind me as soon as I say what I'm about to say so I don't forget. So I'd back it out, just simplify it a little bit more. Purposes are what we're going to do. Passions are how we're going to do it. Now, if you're there's a book from Max Lucado called The Cure for the Common Life. In the back of that book, there's an appendix. I forget what it says in the back of the book, but it's clear when you're looking at the table of contents. And he'll take you through an exercise. And there's an acronym that goes story. I don't love all parts of it, but basically what it's going to do is this like, where are your strengths? What topics do you like to be in? What kind of environment? That's the O. And I don't remember what the O stands for, but I replaced it with environment. Like, what kind of environment do you do your best in? Right? And then what is the R? Relationships. What kind of people, right, can you work with? And then the Y is the yes, like where have you gotten positive affirmation that what you just did was good and valuable? So if someone wants to, now his definition of passion is going to be a little bit different than mine, but if you want to look at how you're going to get things done, that would be a great place to start.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And we will have that link in the show notes for anybody listening, so you can check that out. And speaking of links in the show notes, we are going to be linking to your ebook, Habits of Heroes, which you created as a free resource on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Who did you have in mind when you wrote it? And how would you recommend people use this ebook?
Well, the ebook is, well, it's written towards men. It's written not for men, towards men. And the reason I say that, it's just like my book, Raising Men. It's a marketing choice for the most part, right? So the publisher, Navy SEAL, men, everything like that. All the fundamentals, I live inside of fundamentals. I operate in fundamentals, which means the principles that I'd be talking about inside of that book would apply to women as well. You guys just do your filter and for your particular situation. And I would say the book is really just, I wrote it a long time ago and it just continues to be out there. But it's really just kind of an awakening on how to live. It's an awakening from kind of falling back on our haunches, maybe losing some of our fire. And it was the precursor to everything I do now. So it's like an entry point into my world. But I live, eat, breathe, and sleep to use my teaching people how to use passions to harmoniously fulfill their purposes. But that book will kind of bring you into my world.
Awesome. Okay. And I'm assuming because it's called Habits of Heroes, you are going to dive into some various habits that people might be able to adopt in order to find that life that they're looking for.
That's an interesting question. I think it wouldn't be so direct. I wouldn't be like directly saying, "Oh, this habit X, Y, Z." It's more like I'm describing things that people are doing, and the implication there is like that's their habitual way of being. I
Okay.
don't know if that makes sense. You can,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that makes sense. That does.
Yeah, I do. I do. Teach direct habit building in a kind of a odd way, but it starts with that book where I start talking about why we're building the habits.
Okay. That's interesting. And when it comes to habits, what would you say is a habit that people often think is helpful when it comes to being resilient, but actually might work against building their resilience?
Ooh, that they think is helpful to build their well, I would say anything that's not maintaining their ability to take action, right? Or repairing their ability or restoring their ability to take action. Now that would cover a whole lot of ground. So if someone asks themselves, like, okay, well, is what I'm doing right now maintaining my ability to hold on to as much resilience as possible? Am I reducing the damage that's coming in from my perseverance? Or is what I'm doing restoring my capacity to take action the next day? Anything that's not that.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously that would vary per person, but yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Now, what would you say is the role that rest plays in resilience, especially for, a lot of people that listen to this show have been through a lot, but they're also high achieving people. So they're constantly going out to do more, working hard, trying to, do all the things. Is rest important and what role does it play?
Okay, great question. First, I got to address high achieving. So, what is high achieving? So, for me, and let me bring that back to what I would call high achieving. So, have you ever heard the idea that success it really is what it is? It's a matter of intention. So, success is when we've done something that we've intended to do. So, high achieving, I think sometimes look is a little bit more like a high amount of effort and hustle. I don't know that they're necessarily achieving anything that would align with their ability to live a good life. That's just a little soapbox right there.
That's
Now,
interesting. I actually want to come back to that, but let's keep going first.
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So now let's talk about rest. Let's talk about sleep, nutrition, exercise, meditation, whatever. But yeah, rest in particular. I sleep. I wear a Whoop band primarily for that reason. So I like to get my 100% sleep. I know if I'm short 15 minutes, they have a little sleep debt thing. If I'm short 20 minutes, and that might sound crazy, but here's why. I'm gonna go back to purpose. So if I'm operating, not even if I didn't believe in God, but I operated as if God had a purpose for me, right? For me, I believe He does. But you know what I'm saying? Like even if I'm like, well, let me just, what would life look like if I operate as if the Creator of the universe had this particular purpose for me? Well, don't you think you better be well rested and ready to go? Like the next day, we live in a hyper competitive and dynamic environment. Our value is not based on how hard we work anymore. So a lot of people get away with this like sleep thing because what they're doing is trying to put in hours and effort the next day, but that doesn't work. You're just going to always put in hours and effort. The real value that we can be for other human beings is to create new solutions. It requires creativity. So we need sleep. We need to hydrate. We need to exercise. We need to come at this thing fresh. It is a big deal. And that's another thing I'd say about the sleep and meditate, whatever it is you're using, right? A lot of people are moving around out there and they're not taking themselves that seriously in their own life. And they're certainly not taking themselves seriously in the lives of others. So if purpose starts with us identifying what gives us the ability to live a good life, but it's so that we can help other people live a good life, then it's like, how dare you show up to that mission the next day not well rested? Like what is going on there? And I'll tie that back to purpose again. They don't have a clear purpose. Because if you had a clear purpose, you'd be like, no way, I have to show up fresh, ready to go.
I have heard from folks that I've talked to when they're in the middle, especially of these things like divorce or whatever, they will often frame it as, well, I can't get enough sleep because I've got to do all these things. And so it's almost like getting enough sleep or exercise or whatever it is that we're talking about would be, in their mind, almost a selfish decision. And yet the selfish decision is actually not to do that because you can't show up for others well if you haven't taken care of yourself.
Yeah. And so it's called being selfishly altruistic. So as a father, right? I was the main provider, and it doesn't have to be the father, but traditional, we worked in our family, traditional roles, right? Selfishly altruistic. So I mean, no, dad's going to bed. Dad's writing. Do not knock on the door. Whatever that is. And I'd also pose this. So understand that idea. We're being selfishly altruistic. That's how we're going to care for people. You're going to be able to care for more people in bigger ways if you're fresh, if you're at your highest level of self. Another thing that I like to witness and observe for myself sometimes too, I have to do this. If you were to look back in the past 10 years, And if you would have slept 8 hours every night, is there anything you'd be missing?
There you go.
I'd pose that question to anybody not taking care of themselves. You know, if you're an adult, I could ask them like, hey, in the last 10 years, if you would have slept 8 hours every night, would you be without something right now? Would you have missed out on something?
Interesting. Yeah. And it seems like, well, no, that's an interesting way to think of it.
Yeah, you will not have missed anything. And then usually when people ponder, they're like, actually, not only would I have not missed anything, I would have more good things in my life because I was rested, took care of myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And this ties back to that idea that we were talking about earlier a bit about the idea of high functioning. And you said it often can be more of somebody putting in a lot of effort or a lot of hustle, but not necessarily like high functioning doesn't necessarily, or high achieving, I guess is the way we're talking about it. That high achieving can be a lot of effort or hustle, but not necessarily meaning they're achieving more. And I think that's really interesting because another thing that I've been doing a lot of research on lately and studying is on burnout in people who self identify as high achieving. And this would point to what you were saying is like they're putting in a lot of effort and hustle, but it's not necessarily getting them anywhere further than where they would be. What would you say to the person who's in that struggle? Like they are self proclaimed high achieving, but they're just burning out and hustling themselves to death.
Then they succeeded at achieving burnout and hustling themselves to death. Like, what are they achieving?
Yeah.
And I'll come back. I'll always come back to purpose because that's what it's kind of like my whole world here. But here's what happens to people: they go career first. This is what I was taught by somebody much smarter than me, like a genius level guy. They go career first, right? And then they try to stuff their personal lives, their humanness, their relationships with others, with God, with their fun, with their body. They try to stuff all that into the box of time, energy, creativity, and currency that career left over. Here's why that happens. They didn't start out with an intention to harmonize the two together as one. They didn't design their life with intention to be like, you know what, I'm going to design my personal life so that when I execute the strategies and tactics there to care for my relationships, to care for my sleep, to care for my body, I'm going to design that in a way so it doesn't cancel my ability to fulfill the strategies and tactics over on the professional side where I'm generating power, I'm generating income, I'm generating quote unquote achievements, and vice versa. So I'm going to do it on the personal side in a way it doesn't cancel it. Matter of fact, I'm going to do it on the personal side in a way that enhances my ability to fulfill on the professional side. And on the professional side, I'm going to do that in a way that doesn't cancel my ability to care for the things in my personal life and in a way that's going to actually enhance it. There's no reason not to do it. It's just a matter of intention. It's a matter of design. Like that's why I have towards the end of phase one of what I teach passion, AKA your offer to the world, right? You heard my definition around passion, but it's like, okay, this is how I'm going to help people. This is what I'm going to do. So when I teach passion, one of the things I have them do is like, okay, I need you to calculate what your offers are, how much money you're going to charge for each offer, and how many of those offers need to go out every week or month, whatever the math is, right? But then I ask them two other things. I'm like, you guys now know your purpose. You've identified all the personal parts of life that either make or destroy your life. How many hours a day can you really work and still care for those things? And how many weeks a year can you really work and still care for your personal stuff? So now it's a matter of design. Now they have a target. And then when they design those offers, it's not harder to design a set of offers that gives you the time you need in your day to care for yourself. It's just different. As a matter of fact, I would say it's actually easier because you clean up so much miscellaneous confusion and BS. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, that all got to go. I just need to do that. So it's just a real matter of intention, and it's a design issue.
So, how do we change that framework in our own minds when we are wired to think about career as being the top part of the tier and making it into what you're talking about?
Well, I'm going to go back to purpose. So when you go through those dozen or so parts of life, the personal pieces, right? I'm talking friends, relationships, spirituality, helping others, the core stuff of human. And there's four ways you can do it. One, you can do it by yourself. You can come up with it on your own, which is going to be pretty flawed. Second way, you can do it with culture. Like, oh, let me use what culture says about what size house I have, what kind of relationships I could be in. Now you're ultra flawed, right? Third, you can do it with a tribe, like, right? So that's my world. I have an online tribe. We do that together. That's a piece of it. You can do it with a group of people. Then it's going to be a little bit better if they're good people, if they're, you know what I mean, decent performing already. But the fourth piece, I mean, they're all going to be in play, but that fourth piece is doing it with God. You sit down, like I use a mind map, and I have a process that people go through, identify, assess, prioritize by power. Like there's a little process to it. It's not overly complicated. And you're like, okay, God, what are the standards? Like, let's just take house. Our body needs food, shelter, transportation, healthcare, right? So you could put body, you could put food, shelter, transportation, healthcare underneath that. Shelter. Like, all right, God, what house are we talking about here? What size? What is my house for? Is it to propel your purpose, my purpose? Is it to care for people, or is it just a place of refuge for me? Is it a place for me to go back and reset and reinvigorate myself for the next day? What is it, God? And you do that question. It's only this drives me crazy. People pay me a bunch of money and sometimes they don't do the assignment. I'm like, I can't even understand. What do you do with your life the next day if you don't know your purpose? It drives me nuts. But think about that. You have that conversation with God and you're on. Like you're locked on. Like, how are you going to walk away with that? He's going to answer. And now you're on a mission from God. What is that, from the Blues Brothers? You're literally on a mission from God.
Mhm.
Just as powerful way to live as I can think. And then you have to use your passions. Here's the thing about purpose. Purpose is going to be beyond yourself and situation, right? It's going to stretch you. I believe we're given these purposes to not only fulfill his particular mission on the planet, his goal, his dream, his the thing he's after, but it's also preparing us for something different, something more. So it's meant to stretch us a little bit, but stretch us in a way where we still care for our bodies so that we can continue to go. Because we're not just racing to age 60. I've got to the spot where I don't have to work anymore. It's terrible. Like that would be the worst thing in the world. Is there's no finish line here. This is an eternal race, but it's not really a race. It's an internal journey. So that purpose with God is what does it.
Interesting. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, this is a different way of thinking than maybe a lot of folks are used to. And so, what would you say to someone who is listening and they want this? They're like, oh, this sounds really good. I want this change, but they're also really afraid of it.
I did have someone just tell me that recently too. When we were talking about purpose, he's like, "Oh, I resist it because it sounds hard." So here's what purpose does for you. Here's how I think about it. So we were given a purpose, and we were given a certain amount of power to fulfill that purpose: time, energy, creativity, and currency. I believe we were probably given a little extra for when we stray, if it takes us a little while to figure it out, but not too much extra. When we are operating our purpose, what we're doing is building our deployable levels of time, energy, creativity, and currency, AKA power. This is another thing that will drive me mad with my own students because they'll be like, oh, I got busy. I didn't do X, Y, Z. I'm like, well, you were too busy to do the thing that will build your deployable time, time, energy, creativity, and currency. It's like they're going into the octagon, like MMA fighting.
Mhm.
It's like they're going into the octagon on Saturday and just getting their butts handed to them. And then on Monday, they think, and then on Monday, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to train. I'm just going to go back into the octagon again next Saturday. So what I'm talking about is not something to add to your day. You're already, everybody that is listening to this is already investing 100% of their time and 100% of their money and 100% of their energy every single day. It's going somewhere. Maybe their money's sitting in the wallet on the dresser. Maybe their energy's sitting on the couch. I don't know where it is. It's all going somewhere. What this is just a redeployment of that stuff. It's a redeployment into something that'll build power. Because if we're going to help other people, we have to have the time, energy, creativity, and currency to do so. Otherwise, all we're trying to do is survive, make sure we survive. So nothing to be scared about. You're gaining power. The whole idea is to gain power. That's what we're doing.
I thought of something when you were saying 100% of our time is going towards something, and you mentioned sitting on the couch. I think for a lot of people, a lot of their time, hopefully not 100% of their time, but a lot of their time goes to the wasted things like scrolling social media, doom scrolling. There's a lot of ways in which people sort of zone out and kind of avoid making decisions or doing things that would be in their purpose and passion. What do you say to the person who's like, I do that for a break and then, they get sucked into it. I've spoken to people who have told me they will get on video games and then all of a sudden like 5 hours will have gone by. I've never been a video game person, but I knit and I could see how that could happen with knitting. I try to be mindful of how long I'm spending, but there are things that we could get sucked into and then we're giving our time in ways that isn't helping our purpose or passion. So how do you change those habits or what would you suggest to somebody stuck in that rut?
Well, two ways is second one's going to be tribe. Don't let me forget that. The first is I remember I have an executive group. It's a smaller group, more intimate. We do one-on-one stuff. And I remember the first group I had, one of the guys, and it's like, hey, I got all this stuff on my calendar. So I'm a fan of blocking my calendar, right? So my calendar, I have a purpose. It has a set of strategies, and those strategies are represented on my calendar. That's commitment. Like, okay, there it is. That's what he's committed to doing. And he's like, it's on my calendar, but it just doesn't stick. So first thing I would say is like, well, not because you don't really have a purpose. So in the SEAL teams, when we do hand-to-hand fighting, we are taught that every fight goes to the death. So I send them back to the purpose. Each part, like just take relationships or take your body. Positive impacts, negative impacts. What's a negative impact of the body not being cared for? Shortened lifespan. Like it's some bad stuff. What are the negative impacts of finances not being cared for? Oh, you're going to start to suffer. Your kids' family's going to start to suffer caring for you. You know what I mean? Like dignity goes away. Like that stuff's got to be real. We are in a real game here. This is what I'm talking about when people aren't taking themselves seriously. We're in a real game here. And that's why we identify the positive and negative impacts. The positive impacts should inspire you. They need to be better than that video game. And the negative impacts need to scare the heck out of you because it will take you to death and demise if you don't get those things cared for. So then the question is like, well, what if somebody can't lock down their purpose and they're going to play the video games? They're cooked. That's for real. Like, yeah, you're done. You're not going to make it. You're going to be some sort of form of older. There will be a time when you can no longer work. There is such a thing as too late. You can't just work till you know what I mean? People have all these weird narratives like, I'll just work till retirement. Like, really? I think it's, you know what I mean? You get 70, 75, whatever the age is, like, you're not going to just keep working. Your body's going to start to break down. And there's going to be real life consequences. And it's going to be horrific. And and if you just keep doing that stuff, then you're done. There is no happy, warm, fuzzy thing. It's like you forfeited your ability to live what you say is a good and dignified life. And you certainly didn't inspire or help anybody else live their good life because you don't know how to do it. So, and then the answer to that is be within a tribe. You can't do this stuff alone. Tribe is a group of 2 or more people who protect and progress and automate the current and future situation of each member of the tribe. Situation is using their passion to fulfill their purpose. You can't do this alone. That's biblical. But you know what I mean? Like people are out there trying to do this alone. It's insane. You couldn't do it. I had to create a group. I created all this because I'm like, I can't do this alone. I got to have people around me to talk about this all the time.
Wow. And what would you say for the person who doesn't have that? Like they don't have a group that they naturally turn to. Maybe they, have gone through something like divorce, so family sort of up in the air and they've moved to a new area and they're trying to find people, but what's the answer for those who just don't have that built-in network right now?
Well, here's the thing. It's not, so when I'm talking about tribe, that whole protect, progress, automate, and accelerate their ability to use their passion to fulfill their purposes. So now you obviously what we just talked about, how serious I am about like the consequences are huge.
Hmm.
Is not a group. This is why I struggle and don't really have respect for men's group and a lot of groups at church. Like I understand we're caring for spirituality, but God created us with multiple concerns, multiple purposes, like for us to handle. I think like guys in particular confuse drinking and barbecue buddies. They think that's their brothers. They think that's a brotherhood. Like, I don't think so, dude. Not even close. That's a gaggle of dudes to drink and eat tri-tip with. Or what you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a tough one. I'm talking about a tribe, a real live group of people who are committed to using their God-given gifts. Think about this. Their God-given gifts to fulfill their God-given purpose. so that they can help others do the same. Like, you have to do this with other people. There's just no narrative. It's why I can't go to a party and hang out with too many people, because they're going to start talking about something. I'm like, why? I don't care about. You know what I mean? Like, did you just mention a football game to me? I'm like, get out of here. What are you talking about? You know what I'm just like, you're killing me. It's like literally being in a. Now, guys, this is my life, so just to, and I'm a little bit over the top sometimes, but I really think about it like this. Go back in the old days when we were hunting, fighting, and getting our food. It feels like winter's coming, and the food store, the storage, right, wherever they store the food in a village, is like, not doesn't have enough in it for winter, and then there's a bunch of people out playing village games. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And it's a better life. Yeah, it sounds like, oh, I don't want to be extreme intent, be worried about money and everything like that. I'm like, don't be worried about it. Just, man, deal with it. Get really good at it. And it's just fun. Then you get to do whatever you want. You have freedom. The whole idea is freedom. So you can deploy it into other things.
Yeah, no,
But
definitely.
they got to find this. And I don't know where else it is. That's why I created it. I'm not trying, that's not like a pitch. I'm just like, this is the only place I know.
Okay,
That's
no,
why I
fair enough.
do it.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for being here today and talking about purpose and passion and resilience. And just as we wrap up, I'd love to know, what is something that you are really excited about for your future, or something you're finding a lot of joy in right now?
I just heard a podcast that talked about scaling in a way I never thought of, but they were talking about scaling as a tool in a shorter timeline, using time as a tool. It's like it even applies to my personal purposes, but my business as well. I just cured myself of cancer, right? I just had a surgery and just recovering and everything like that. I didn't have all my energy back, and just like literally a few weeks ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, here it is. So I'm most excited about that, not just to make things bigger, although that will happen, but I'm excited about how it's going to force me to grow in ways I never even thought about, and how much kind of BS I'm probably already doing myself. Think about this. I teach this for a living, but like, how much BS and ancillary stuff am I doing myself that really somebody else should be doing as part of my team? And that's what I'm most excited about, is it's not really going to that next level part. You know what I mean? Obviously, scaling could be exciting, and especially since, like I said, by design, my offers, if more people accepted them, it doesn't make me work any additional hours. They're designed intentionally for that. But it's really like, oh, who am I going to have to become? What character am I going to develop? So that's my big super on fire for that right now. But on fire in a way where I don't want to do it and I'm scared. Just don't tell anybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been so great. And I know that this conversation is going to resonate with a lot of listeners. And listeners, please know all of the resources that we talked about today, ways to get in touch with Eric and to get his ebook. They're all going to be in the show notes below. If this episode spoke to you today, could you share it with someone who could also use some encouragement? Until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. If today reminded you that resilience is a practice, not a personality trait, you're in the right place. Keep showing up, keep rebuilding, and don't forget, even diamonds start as pressure and mess. For more faith-filled encouragement and real-life tools to help you heal and grow, check out the show notes for some free resources and ways to stay connected. See you next time.